My guest at this time is a business analyst over at Wrestlenomics. It is Brandon Thurston. Brandon, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me here today.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Great to talk with you.
Now, Brandon, I want to start with the news that just kind of broke today. We'll get to the Q1 here stuff in just a second, but there's interest here, it sounds like, from Warner Media possibly getting into the NHL TV rights business. Should this cause any concern to AEW fans? What do you think of this story as of now?
I saw that earlier today. So it could mean that Wednesday Night Hockey comes to TNT. I guess it could mean that Wednesday Night Hockey comes to TBS. Maybe a streaming service. That seems less likely. But no, I think it's possible that this affects AEW, but we'll see. I think there's another interested party. I forget what it is off the top of my head, though. But yeah, maybe Warner Media as well as, is it CBS that's
I think it's CBS. Yeah.
It could. We'll see.
Man, that'd be so wild, right? Like, after all the posturing and everybody thought that NXT was moving because of this, if like AEW wound up getting any kind of significant, I don't know, problems here because of this, it'd just be very ironic in my opinion. You know,
like, think about, so I think they couldn't go to Tuesday or Thursday because of the NBA, which is definitely on TNT.
Right.
So what would be left but Monday and Friday?
Yeah, and like Tony has said, he doesn't want to do Mondays, right? Because of the potential conflict with the Jaguars. So I guess, like, yeah, head-to-head on with SmackDown on Fridays, maybe then? That seems a little, I don't know, anything's possible these days, you know?
Yeah. But maybe they work something out where AEW can stay where it is, and who knows? TNT is not necessarily the home for that, but it could be.
So for AEW Dynamite here, we'll start with the AEW stuff. It's been 2 weeks removed for them since the end of the Wednesday night where we're going head to head with NXT. What have been the biggest things you've noticed, the changes in the viewership trends for AEW now that they're moved here to Wednesday nights unopposed?
So AEW now has an enormous P50 plus audience, viewers over the age of 50, which it didn't have before.
Yeah, that's weird, man. They all just kind of gravitated, yeah?
Yeah. So the first episode that they ran unopposed, they had such a big P50 plus audience that it was their biggest ever. And it was bigger than any P50 plus audience that even NXT had on it since it's been on the USA Network. So I think what happened in the Wednesday Night Wars was at the beginning was a little bit more even, but as time went on, the younger viewers picked AEW more than they picked NXT. So NXT had a sort of a disproportionately old audience because of that. AEW, I think, had a disproportionately young audience because of that. And now things are more even because you don't have to choose live same day when you watch. So we're seeing that. And the viewership, we're obviously seeing big numbers, over 1 million, both of the 2 weeks that AEW has run unopposed so far. But the younger audience not growing as much. The coveted and controversial 18 to 49 audience has grown, but not as much. I think it was a 4.0 the 1 week and down to a 0.37 demo rating the following week, which is above what they were doing when they were running head to head, but not increasing to the degree that total viewership is, because it's being carried by this huge 50 plus audience.
So one of the things that Tony Khan has talked about AEW doing that makes them feel fun and different is they've opened the forbidden door, right? There seems to have been like a lot more crossover with Impact than any other promotion that they're working with. You're a business guy, Brandon. Pros and cons of this Impact relationship. A lot of people scratching their heads, I feel like, right now about why Tony Khan is pursuing this relationship at this moment.
I think he just likes the wildness of the pro wrestling industry, and he has executive vice presidents that need to be given a certain amount of leeway to have executive control to do what they want, including Kenny Omega. Okay. I think Kenny Omega and Don Callis are obviously friends, and they probably wanted to do something together, and maybe it generates some interest for AEW. You get to promote Kenny Omega now as a he's got all these belts. He's both Impact champion and AEW champion. But it is benefiting Impact a lot. It's way more easy to see the ways in which it is benefiting Impact. Their younger viewership, 1849 viewership, has improved quite a bit since the time before they started working with AEW in December, and now they're going to get Kenny Omega at least for a number of weeks here.
Yeah, and so you say that of the two here, you think Impact is getting the better of the deal here, whereas I have a lot of my friends. They're like, well, of course AEW, Tony Khan gets to do whatever he wants, but you say there's tangible growth here from Impact Wrestling because of the relationship with AEW.
For the viewership, at least, yes. And here in the pandemic, we don't really have any other business metrics to look at other than TV viewership, maybe Google web search. But we saw there, especially now that I'm looking at the year-over-year comparisons from April 2020, early on in the pandemic, where everybody was really starting to hurt. Impact's P18 and 49 viewership was very, very low. And obviously they're under 200,000 viewers to begin with, is their sort of ceiling. But they're 1849 viewership was very low early on in the pandemic in April, and they didn't miss any weeks. They didn't run any best of shows. I thought maybe they did, but I had to go back and check and ask, but they didn't.
Okay.
But their 1849 viewership is now higher now than it was in the fall, where they were starting to come back. But they have definitely grown in their younger audience.
Interesting. Let's talk about WWE's business here. So Q1 happened just last week. Vince McMahon, Stephanie, Nick Khan, all on the call here. What were your biggest takeaways? What were your top line items that grabbed your attention here from this investor report?
It was really a Nick Khan podcast, I thought.
Yeah, dude. Vince was so quiet on that call. I noticed that too. It was weird, man. It was weird.
Yeah. Vince talked for 60 seconds and then no more. He didn't participate in the Q&A, which is what happened last time too. He had an opening statement. I think he had a longer opening statement. He always has an opening statement, but he didn't participate in the question and answer session with the stock analysts at all for the second time in a row. But this was a lot of Nick Khan giving his thoughts on the state of the media industry, breaking stories like NBC and the NHL are no longer going to work together. But I think the biggest takeaway is the hype that he added to around the idea that Amazon and Apple might get into bidding for live sports rights. So I read that as a coded message to Fox that we're going to shop SmackDown somewhat aggressively when the deal comes up to be renegotiated. That'll probably start to be renegotiated late next year, 2022, and probably, if previous rounds of negotiation are any indication, they'll announce a deal in maybe the spring of 2023. So it sounds like Nick Khan is saying we're going to be really interested in negotiating and trying to get the best value possible for SmackDown. I think Raw stays with NBC Universal just because of how deep the relationship is between WWE and NBC Universal with Raw, NXT, reality programming. But I think there's a good chance that WWE will shop around SmackDown, and maybe it goes to Fox, but maybe it goes to Amazon or Apple, who are among the biggest companies in the world and can certainly afford to pay a great deal of money if they're looking to invest further in their streaming services to get ahead in this competitive streaming space.
Now, it's interesting that you say that, because I've had people talk to me and say that they think that 2023 timeframe there, maybe there's a buyout offer there for NBC Universal. They're renting all of this property right now, and Raw and NXT and the reality shows, right? When they could maybe just make a big offer, pull this thing under the umbrella, and incorporate that more into what they're doing at Peacock and wherever else. Do you lean more towards the idea that they're going to keep this thing fragmented and WWE will remain its own entity with SmackDown and Raw separately, or do you think there's something to the idea that this could all be building, all this corporate shake up and things like this could all be building to something a lot bigger here in just a couple of years?
I think it all depends on whether Vince McMahon is alive. I think this company will never sell in the lifetime of Vince McMahon. As long as he's working and he's the CEO of the company, which I think he will be, as long as he's healthy enough to do it, he will never sell the company, because this is his life and livelihood, and this is his everyday. And Nick Khan, I thought, really affirmed that idea in his interview that he did with Colin Cowherd on Colin Cowherd's podcast, where he basically said that he doesn't think that Vince is going to sell the company. I'm sure that's got to be something that his new president and Vince have discussed. So I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think it makes increasing sense for NBC Universal to acquire WWE. Why continue to lease content like Raw for hundreds of millions of dollars a year when you could own it and continue to exploit the value of WWE? I think there's a number of ways still even yet to be realized in terms of how WWE intellectual property could be used to NBC Universal's benefit. There's probably a way that WWE could be integrated into Universal Studios or something like that, for example. So I think it makes an increasing amount of sense, considering they own Raw, they own NXT and reality TV, which is also important. But now, obviously, Peacock owns the rights to the W Network content.
Yeah, $1 billion right there. I mean, that's a lot of money you're paying to rent and lease these items here. So that's interesting to hear you say that they think that they would continue to fragment them here. NBC keeps leasing this thing in a couple of years, and they get to go off and make their SmackDown money elsewhere. What do you think about the relationship with Vince and Nick Khan here? It's really surprising to me because, like you say, Vince is never going to sell. He's always going to be the CEO. This is his livelihood, but he does seem to have given up some of the direction, at least of the company, to Nick Khan. I mean, there's some really old school names that are now no longer with the company and everything. It seems like there's going to be a shift here towards Nick Khan. Is he really accumulating this much power this quickly right now?
I think so. And remember, Nick Khan was not exactly a stranger to this company before August when he came in and was hired. He's the one who negotiated the deals, the 2018, the deals that were completed in 2018 and went to in effect in late 2019, which are the current US TV deals for Raw and SmackDown. So WWE and Nick Khan have worked together before. Obviously, he only started as an executive for WWE in August. But to the extent that I've heard Nick Khan speak and perform up to this point, I can see how Vince loves him. On the Cowherd interview, he talked about how sleep is overrated. So you can see in some ways how Vince and Nick Khan might get along really well. But it is interesting that Nick Khan is a lawyer. Vince infamously cannot stand lawyers. But here's Nick Khan, a lawyer, bringing in more of his former lawyer colleagues into WWE from CAA, which is a creative artist agency, the talent agency that he previously worked for. I think, but Nick Khan has really proven himself in terms of he got the Raw and SmackDown deals done for them. He's the one who helped them split off SmackDown onto Fox, and it made a big difference in terms of how much revenue WWE is now pulling in. So he did that before he ever came to the company. And then he did the Peacock deal, which is a more valuable deal on an average annual basis than the UFC deal with ESPN Plus. So I think that sort of proves to Vince that, look, he's pulling in all this money and he's really multiplying the value of our most valuable pieces of content. And he's the president. This is the number 2 executive in the company. So yeah, I think it gives Vince some validation to see how much the value, how much the fees, how high the fees can go for Raw and SmackDown and the W Network content.
Yeah, and the thing with Vince is his leadership is twofold, right? There's the business vision that he has, and then there's the creative vision that he has. And it's kind of been all under one umbrella here since the beginning of WWE time. With Nick excelling as well as he has in the business area right here, and it seems like Vince is allowing him a little more flexibility with how they grow in that regard. I think it's interesting when I read that he's also the person who wanted Adnan Virk, right, to be at the Raw commentary desk. His decision making seems to be moving even a little bit kind of into the creative presentation side of the business right now, which really catches me off guard. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I guess Adnan Virk is a former client of Nick Khan. I see that as a favor, maybe nepotism at worst. Okay. But I don't see it as, I don't think Nick Khan's going to start contributing to creative. I don't think that's his interest, and Vince is probably very protective of that. I mean, above all, Vince will continue to be the head of creative. That's where he wants to focus his energy. I think he's more glad to delegate corporately.
I guess one of the reasons I say that is because I read about the strategy where he wants to, treat it like a property like Marvel, right? Speak more Hollywood speak. And pro wrestling's not like a hip new genre, right? There's some pretty antiquated tactics in WWE. One of the things that caught me recently was the report about Kalisto's release and how, you got Lindsay Dorado here purposely pitching to Vince stereotypical Mexican ideas because he knows that that's what the creative head of the company wants. I just don't see that jiving with modern Hollywood right now. It just seems like two completely different planets. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a disconnect of Vince's old world creative mind with the new world that his company exists in. And I think pro wrestling is it's a popular enough form of entertainment to continue to be as popular as it is, which is popular enough, at least the major league WWE is popular enough to live in this space where it's a fact that the most valuable, the most viewed live content has become multiple times more valuable than it was in the recent past. And as part of what I see Nick Khan representing is he's this pivot from the previous co-presidents, George Barris and Michelle Wilson, where they were more about trying to make WWE into this tech company. You look at the other FANG companies like Netflix and Facebook and things like that, and to see the ways in which they use data, or they launched their own streaming service, and to try to sort of embody that with the content. Well, we own our own content too, so we can excel even more because of that. And to some extent, the network didn't work out the way that they expected it to. They expected basically twice as many subscribers as they got, and their pivot with Nick Khan, and it's a decision made by Vince McMahon to let those co-presidents go in January 2020, is to use their content, use their valuable IP, and to make the best deals possible for it, and to say, hey, we're not a tech company. We don't have the expertise and we don't have the resources to get the most out of data or to get the most out of a streaming service that we own and operate, but to sell it to others who have far more resources like NBC Universal, and to let them use all their expertise and all their knowledge and resources to get the most out of it. And we'll just, charge them a fee, and it'll be a pretty good fee too, because they can afford it, because these are far bigger companies. Comcast is a multiple $100 million market capital company, and WWE is just a $4 billion company. So.
Yeah. And so with the rollout strategy here then seems to be like, similarly to what they did in the States, they're going to go around the world now. Will like the WWE network slowly phase out as they find partners in the various countries then that they're going to put their content on? Do you see that being the direction this is heading then?
Yeah. So they've done this in the US. They've kind of done this in India and Canada too, through their existing TV partners there. With Rogers, it's distributed through the cable system in Canada, Rogers, and it's distributed through a service called Sony Live with their Raw and SmackDown partners in India, Sony. So it's been pointed out to me though by a listener that those aren't necessarily the same kind of deals, a streaming deal like the Peacock deal is. I think Sony Live is a streaming service, but I know that's what they want to do. That's what they said on the earnings call. So I think that's an area for growth, and an area that they're going to continue to explore and see if they can get value out of. I'm just not sure. For example, in the UK, where there's still obviously the direct-to-consumer WWE network, there doesn't seem to be an obvious partner that I can see anyway. And with the people I talk to and ask who know the UK media business better than I do, there doesn't seem to be an obvious partner. Maybe Amazon, but does Amazon want to do a deal that's not global and that's just local to one region? I don't know. So it's just complicated, the ways in which the US media environment is much more lucrative than even in economies that are other wealthy nations.
How important is that Indian market to them? It came up on the call, and I know that they did the Superstar Spectacular, and I know that I mean, you probably know this. Like, how many people are watching WWE every week in India?
There's somebody who tags me on Twitter once in a while. And Nick Khan did mention the viewership in the earnings call before this one for the Superstar Spectacular, and you can find the transcript online. It's something like tens of millions of people. I remember India has 1.2 or 1.3 billion people in it. India is a big deal. India is their number 2 market. I believe it's exceeded the UK in terms of the value of the TV rights there. Again, largely driven by the size of the population. It's just scale. The UK is still a wealthier economy, a higher median income than in India, but the TV deal in India, I think, is worth $50 million average annual value. And I think the new UK deal that started in 2020 is, I think their previous deal with Sky was maybe worth somewhere around $33 million AAV. And I haven't seen it reported, or I don't really know what the UK deal is worth currently with BT Sport and with, I think it's Channel 4, but it's probably either a lateral movement or a slight step down. So I think India has decisively moved ahead as their number 2 TV market.
See, because that's interesting to me, because I I had always heard it was really hard for them to make a lot of money in India because, like you said, like the economy in India is very different, right? These are people that don't have a lot of disposable income. You're saying that the real value there isn't in touring and merchandise; it's just the TV rights deal. It's just how much money they're going to get paid to put their product over on TV on Indian television. That's the bottom line. It sounds like.
I guess, and it's just the scale. I think I don't know what the population is in the UK off the top of my head, but the population in India is multiple times that.
Yeah.
And just because of the scale, they're able to get more money out of Sony that way.
Okay. With Peacock, by the way, do we have any idea how many? I mean, I don't know that it's been reported. I know he shied away from it on the call. Do we have any idea how many people are taking in the WWE product on Peacock right now, or no?
No idea. Peacock has. I know Peacock has reported how many users they have, but I find it extremely hard to unpack. Like, the only thing that I think would be meaningful is if they told us how many. What's the viewership for live content for WrestleMania or for Fastlane on Peacock. But in terms of subscribers, I don't know how you even calculate that, because if you're a Peacock subscriber, you get access to the W Network, but you get access to all sorts of stuff. And who knows why you're retaining your subscription? Maybe you're retaining because you're watching The Office or you're watching Murder, She Wrote. There's a ton of content now that's just that W is just part of a bundle in. So
yeah, and we're talking a lot about TV rights fees and streaming fees and all that, and it's obvious that's where the glut of income is coming from the company right now. But they've also been saving a lot of money not touring. Like, that's one of the things that I think has become most obvious to people during the pandemic is WWE can be kind of even more profitable from like a single theater just taking in these television rights fees and not even having to tour. How do you think going back on the road in the back half of this year is going to affect the value of the stock, the company? Do you think it improves the value of the company, or do you think that there's going to be a Q3, Q4 where they dip a little bit and have to explain why that is because of the touring?
Well, if they go back to touring, the biggest thing is they'll get to do Saudi Arabia events again.
Sure.
To the tune of $50 or $55 million per show. And that's by far, that's going to outweigh any loss that they might have in the live events division. So before the pandemic, most quarters that weren't WrestleMania quarters in their live events segment, they lost money. They lost operating income. Now you can say there's a number of hidden values in running live events that you get that don't just appear on a quarterly report. But so right now at the Thunderdome is extremely expensive. Thunderdome is more expensive than it would be if the pandemic disappeared today and they went back to touring. Their production expenses will be lower by touring and running Raw and SmackDown live in arenas. The Thunderdome is that expensive. What was really cheap and did save them money is when they were running TV out of the Performance Center without the Thunderdome. That's when they were saving a lot of money. But ratings were really dipping in that time. And one of their responses was to invent the Thunderdome, which they've done with partners. So that's become more expensive. Christina Salem, who's the chief financial officer, mentioned that they've learned how to make it more efficient. Didn't get into specifics in this quarter, which we're referring to Q1 versus Q3. So it's a little bit less expensive, but they have said something to the effect of that it's 30% more expensive than it would be if they were touring. But the biggest takeaway about what they're gonna get out of returning to touring is they're going to be able to do Saudi events, which offsets any loss that they would incur from going back to their old live event touring schedule, which it's not certain that they will. Maybe they just won't do house shows anymore. Maybe those are something that's drastically cut down on, or just a thing of the past entirely. I would imagine they do fewer house shows, but we'll see.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about, Brandon, obviously I kind of mentioned it earlier, a lot of corporate shakeup in WWE right now. Joe Villa's out 22 years. Mark Carrano is obviously the big one. What's your reaction to seeing kind of how quick WWE was responding to respond to that kind of negative publicity around that Mickie James incident? I mean, it's very different than I've seen them handle bad optic stories in years gone by.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the story is with Mark Carrano. Maybe that was the last straw, among other things. But WWE wants to protect its brand image. I'm sure Stephanie is mindful of that, and they don't want to let the perception be out there that they don't treat their talent with a great deal of care. So, yeah, we heard on the other night that that person has been fired, and yeah, I started to hear too that it was Mark Carrano that's gone. So.
That's surprising, man. He's just been there forever. So anyway,
Yeah, and a lot of the PR people who were moved out, it appears to be that's kind of a regime change thing with Nick Khan and some of the hires that he's made recently.
Yeah. All right. Well, Brandon, hey, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat the business with me. I'd love to have you back here. After they do the next quarterly report, we can dive back into some more numbers and topics of the day. But for the meantime, where can people go find you, follow you, support you, all those great things?
Sure. You can I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Wrestlenomics that gives you access to locked posts and a giant Wrestlenomics viewership spreadsheet that has over 15,000 data points in it. And I update it now 5 days a week because there's wrestling on 5 nights a week. You can go to Wrestlenomics.com. That's where a lot of my written work is. You can follow Wrestlenomics on Twitter at Wrestlenomics. You can follow me on Twitter at Brandon Thurston. I have a podcast, Wrestlenomics Radio, that drops every weekend. The new episode just dropped this morning.